Good evening, I'm Mike Moore. I'm the Planning and Building Director for the City of Mill Valley. And tonight is our final speaker of our three-speaker series as part of our general plan update. And I also want to mention that the library, as part of its first Friday series, which many of you may be familiar with, is also doing a speaker in conjunction with the general plan update next Friday, May 4th, which is the first Friday in May. Peter Calthorpe will be the speaker here at the library upstairs. And Peter is a world-renowned planner, urban designer, and will be speaking on sustainable development in the Bay Area. You just can't show up like you can for these sessions. You actually have to register in advance for the first Friday series. So if you go to the library's website, you can do that and get registered, so you can attend that presentation if you're interested in that.
You might point out that it's free.
Oh yes, it is also free, as these have been. So we're very pleased tonight to have as our speaker John King. John is the urban design critic for the San Francisco Chronicle. Many of you may be familiar with his columns about various design and planning issues around the Bay Area. He's been out snapping photos of Mill Valley and is going to talk about Mill Valley and maintaining the character of a small community in the face of all of the various forces that are at work in the region, and talk a little bit about Mill Valley's particular characteristics. So please join me in welcoming John King.
Before I start at all, I want to apologize. You're going to be looking at these deer for a while. I'm not quite sure how to black it and actually bring it back. So you just, when folks like me come to Mill Valley, we're dazzled that there are deer gambling alongside the roadways and things like that. So you'll get to know these two deer very well. I also want to thank Mike and Danielle for inviting me, and I appreciate all of you for turning up. Honestly, if none of you had turned up, it would still be a plus for me because I have never been in this library before. This is such a terrific building. It's interesting, this has nothing to do with the talk, but it's interesting that there's a whole era of Bay Area modernists, Worcester, Bernardi, and Emmons, which was part of it, who were so good at the small scale, and then as the region started growing, they kind of would botch up the larger scale and things like that. But you come into a building like this, which is so masterful. I thought it was kind of impressive on the outside, but then coming into the main reading area upstairs totally knocked me out. And actually was a bit, I do a column that runs on Sunday called Cityscapes. That's one building, just one small building a week and a few photographs. Also a book, I hope it's upstairs, although it's only in paperback. But this Sunday is going to be on a building in San Francisco that is board-formed concrete, because I think that's a real interesting architectural style. And San Francisco is not super rich in board-formed concrete buildings, rather a minimal taste. But if you go upstairs and you look at the fireplace when you're on the terrace, that is like perfect board-formed concrete where you can read the grain and the redwood or whatever they use to mold it. And I was looking at the chimney thinking, geez, I wish this was the building next to it. But, so my smartphone has its limits, so I'm not going to go try and shoot something on this road. But again, so thank you all for inviting me. And I want to start, again, like I said, you're going to be looking at these deer for a while. I want to start by giving you a little bit of my background, just why I'm interested in giving the talk tonight, why I also feel there's not a whole lot I can tell you. I can kind of give you a broad context, but I can't tell you here's how Mill Valley should be. I actually grew up in Walnut Creek. I was born in Texas, but my family moved there when I was in kindergarten. And For those of you who know Broadway Plaza, I mean, when we moved here, what's now Nordstrom is where the Lucky's was. What's now Neiman Marcus is where the Penny's was. The Chico's is where our bank was, so on and so forth. I could walk to Walnut Groves until we were cut down for my elementary school. So I mean, in other words, Walnut Creek's a very different city from Mill Valley, but I'm very aware of just having seen the whole transition of change, that there's a place that has a certain type of image, and then it grows and grows and it changes, physically changes, culturally changes as well. And there's a whole interesting set of issues that get opened up in terms of what do you react to? How do you react to it? What are the reactions? And that was a long time ago. I'm not 16 anymore. And I still, at the corner of Civic and Ignacio Valley, that's where Lupoy's was. And I remember Lupoy's. That was a little general store that marked the end of Walnut Creek. Until you got to the Eichler subdivision and then our subdivision. But I mean, the Lupoy's was probably torn down in about 1972, but I still remember. So anyway, I'm also saying this because before I started doing the urban design and architecture writing at the Chronicle, we had, back before the internet arrived in force, we had regional editions that we did for a few years, and I was our Contra Costa columnist, so actually based in Walnut Creek. And it was real interesting because the issue of change was huge there. And I found myself in this kind of interesting position where I could remember how it all was, but I could remember how it all was because my parents moved into the brand new subdivision that had just been built. So it's kind of, I felt I was hypocritical to play the when I was growing up here card. But it is interesting because all of us carry the map of the past in our head, and we view things through how it used to look, how we were when we first saw it, so on and so forth. And I don't want to say that Walnut Creek is analogous to Mill Valley. They're very different cities. I mean, this one, you definitely have it over Walnut Creek in terms of trees. Being a good Contra Costa boy, I think Mount Diablo is more impressive than Mount Tamalpais, but I'm aware of the mythic statues. And then also, it's just, it was from the start the regional crossroads, even though the population was never the biggest. Whereas the center of Mill Valley, which I'll be talking about, even with a train stop there, I don't think it ever functioned as the trading hub of a big portion of Mill Valley. So it's not that I'm making the direct thing, it's just, and you can see I kind of did these on the fly. So I don't feel I can really tell you what Mill Valley's character is or what Mill Valley's character ought to be. But maybe what I can do is, as someone who knows the Bay Area, who thinks a lot about the Bay Area, who knows Marin, thinks about just how things grow and change, who remembers when the Mill Valley, California song was a hit as a kid. Just kind of some of my own impressions, both of what might be some of the essential impressions of Mill Valley to an outsider, and then also thoughts about, well, do you layer change on that? Or how do you layer change on that? And we finally get to this brilliant photograph of mine, which is obviously a huge characteristic of Mill Valley, is just the intersection of nature and the built terrain. And it just, on Blithedale, I could rattle off a whole bunch of names, but 10 times as many. I mean, just the way that the road makes way for the redwood trees rather than the other way around. The fact that there are parts where the creek is culverted, but parts where the creek isn't culverted. The fact that you're in the village, or whatever you call it, and then you're out of it almost instantly. I mean, there is such an imprint of nature here that it's remarkable. And honestly, I think that I don't see any way that would change if there was development, and I'm not proposing this at all, but I mean, if big buildings popped up in downtown and on Miller Avenue and things like that, all of that would still be there. So that's one thing that I think is just so vivid about the city, is just how remarkably threaded nature is with what does feel cosmopolitan when you're there. And I should mention that, my approach was kind of the classic. I drove in on East Blythedale and walked around town and then drove around and went up and then came back. Thank goodness. Just when I was worried that maybe I'd made a wrong turn forever, I realized the numbers were going down and I was heading back into town. But so one thing obviously is nature. But there's another thing, and I should mention not only nature off in the distance, but now we get to say goodbye to the deer. Also closer into town. This was on, I think, Public Walk 49, with a little brick path going up. And so it's like, wow, chickens wandering around. This is even more exotic than deer. I can see deer in Berkeley, but I only hear chickens in Berkeley, which is where I live now. But another characteristic that I guess I kind of knew subtly, but I know a lot more after having walked around and really looked at the city today, is the architectural eclecticism of it. And that's something that I think is really a treasure to preserve. And I was talking a bit with Mike beforehand, and it doesn't sound like there's any sort of design group who kind of wants to say, this is the Mill Valley look we should all have. I mean, obviously, wood shingle buildings and things, but I just really enjoyed